What is going on, Hawks Nation? Welcome back to another episode of Hawks Fan TV. As always, I am your host, AC, and in today's episode, I'm going to be breaking down on how I think the Atlanta Hawks stack up against the rest of the Eastern Conference teams. Now, I'm going to be I'm not going to be ranking every single team in the East 1 through 15, best to worst or worst to best or anything like that, but rather I'm going to be putting them in different categories from tier 1 being elite all the way to tier 5, which are basically bottom feeders and battling for a potential lottery pick or anything like that. Although I will say I don't think anyone in the Eastern Conference will be full on tanking or anything like that. So let's just get that out the way. The East this year is very, very strong, in my opinion. Probably the best it's ever been in the last decade or so. That comes to recent memory, at least. Like, I can't think of a better Eastern Conference 1 through 8 from a playoff team perspective than what we're going to see this coming season. So how I'm going to define these different tiers is tier 1 is going to be the elite teams, right? Elite teams meaning, championship contenders. They're most likely going to be favorites to come out of the East. And at very worst, they should at least be making an Eastern Conference Finals and nothing short of that, right? Anything short of at least a conference finals from anyone in this tier would be a huge disappointment. So that's going to be tier 1, the elite teams. Tier 2 is going to be teams that are still very, very good, but borderline elite, but not quite as good as the teams in tier 1. Okay, now teams in this category in tier 2 could be teams that could definitely make a finals run. Like, it wouldn't be that surprising if they made it to the finals and even ultimately win a championship as well, but still they're not as quite as good as the tier 1 teams. Tier 3 is going to be the above average teams. Basically, they're going to be over 500. They're probably going to get out the first round, but their ceiling is most likely going to be a second round exit. Okay, that's going to be the tier 3 teams. So still pretty good, slightly above average. Then you have tier 4, which are basically sub 500 teams battling for like a 7th or 8th spot or a play-in. So teams that aren't obviously as good as tiers 1 through 3. Maybe 500, maybe slightly below, but I don't think anyone from the East this year, at least 1 through 8, are going to be under 500. But again, these guys are going to be a first round exit most likely, and I don't think they're going to make it to the second round. And then finally, we have tier 5, which are basically just non-playoff teams. So we'll go ahead and start with tier 5. Now, I know everyone's waiting to see where I'm going to rank the Atlanta Hawks, and we'll get to that in just a second here. But let's actually look at the entirety of the Eastern Conference landscape here, because as I mentioned, the East is very, very strong. Super competitive this year, and our Hawks are definitely not going to have an easy road ahead. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the rankings here. Now, tier 5, okay, non-playoff teams, potential bottom feeders, things like that. I have 3 teams in this category. We'll start off with the Cleveland Cavaliers, okay. They have some good young pieces like Darius Garland, Colin Sexton, things like that. But again, don't really see the Cavs doing anything. And not because, and I'll say this, full disclaimer, I don't think any of these teams that I put in this category is because they suck. But I just think the East this year is just that good, and they're just not better than any of the teams that I list above them. So, coming in tier 5, Cleveland Cavaliers. I don't expect them to do much of anything this upcoming season. The second team is going to be the Detroit Pistons. Yes, they were one of the worst teams last year or this past season. They got the number 1 pick, selected Cade Cunningham, which is probably the best prospect that we've seen in the last couple of years. But Cade Cunningham is definitely going to move the needle a little bit. But again, the Pistons are super young, but they have some quality young pieces like Cade Cunningham, Sadiq Bey, and a few other players like that. But again, I don't expect them to make so much noise in year 1 of their rebuild. So again, non-playoff team. The third team, that I'm going to have in tier 5, and this is the last team I have in this category, are going to be the Orlando Magic. Orlando Magic, last season, they were coming in as potential play-in teams, maybe a 7th or 8th seed. They lost Evan Fournier. They lost Nikola Vucevic. Wait, is that his? Yeah, Vucevic, who's their best player, and so they're going to stink. Now, again, like the Pistons and the Cavs, they have a lot of young, exciting players. Jalen Suggs, Cole Anthony, who's the guy that came from the Nuggets? his name is slipping my mind, but that player as well. So actually, let me look him up real quick. Who was that player that came over to the Nuggets from the Nuggets? It's driving me crazy. RJ Hampton. So yeah, those three players alone, solid young players, Mo Bamba, Markelle Fultz, things like that. But again, I don't expect the Orlando Magic to do much of anything this coming season. Maybe in a few years from now, but now is not the time for them. So that is it for Tier 5. Non-playoff teams that aren't going to make a whole lot of noise come playoff time. Not teams that I'm not worried about. And they should be easy wins, hopefully, whenever we see them on the schedule this upcoming season. So that's it for Tier 5. Moving on to Tier 4, I have 4 teams in this tier. Now, like I mentioned, Tier 4 teams are going to be basically teetering on that 500 record level. Teams that are going to be battling for a 7th or 8th spot or a play-in 9 or 10. So these teams are still decent, right? They're going to make the playoffs as a 7th or 8th seed, but again, first round exits at best. So coming in at number 1, or the 4th team, would be the Toronto Raptors. The Toronto Raptors, they have some decent pieces like Fred VanVleet, Chris Boucher, Gary Trent Jr., players like that. But again, I don't expect them to make a whole lot of noise either. But, they could definitely be in that 7 to 10 range. And they have good coaching. Nick Nurse is a great coach. So, I wouldn't be all that surprised if they did make a playoff spot as the 7th or 8th seed. So I got the Raptors in Tier 4. Then I have the Charlotte Hornets. Charlotte Hornets made a lot of noise kind of early and midway into the season. They were definitely battling for a playoff spot until Gordon Hayward and LaMelo Ball got injured. But fully healthy, I think the Hornets definitely could sneak in as like a 7th or 8th seed, like I mentioned. They have some quality pieces like LaMelo Ball, Gordon Hayward, Terry Rozier, players like that. So I think the Hornets are definitely could be a sneaky, decent team, sneaking in as that 7th or 8th spot. Then we have the Washington Wizards. Washington Wizards, obviously, they lost a big piece in Russell Westbrook, who is now on the LA Lakers. But with the departure of Russell Westbrook, who I think was definitely a big reason why they even made the playoffs this past season. He basically put the team on his back, went on that crazy run of just basically getting a triple-double every single game for I don't even know how many games towards the second half of the season. But yeah, with him gone and the pieces that they acquired back, and Kyle Kuzma, Montrezl Harrell, a couple of those guys, those are solid players, right? But I don't think even all of those players combined are going to make the same impact that Russell Westbrook had. But again, decent players, Kyle Kuzma, Harrell, of course, Bradley Beal. But again, I don't think the rest of the supporting cast is as good as these other teams. So again, I think I see them at that 500 level, maybe a slightly below 500. Then we have the 4th and final team in the Tier 4 ranking is going to be the New York Knicks. Now, some of you people might be thinking, the New York Knicks, they were the number 4 seed this past season, yada, yada, yada. Now, the New York Knicks, the only reason why they even made it as far as they did and why they made a top 4 seed was simply because, A, no one took them seriously last season, B, Tom Thibodeau was just basically running his players to the ground, giving players like Julius Randle, RJ Barrett league-leading minutes. Like, they literally were 1 and 2 for most minutes played in the regular season. Derrick Rose was playing significant heavy minutes at his age. So, again, the Knicks were basically just treating every single regular season game like it was a playoff game. So kudos to them. They tried their hearts out, but ultimately got gentlemen swept by our Atlanta Hawks. Pretty easy sweep, or it would have been an easy sweep if we didn't blow that big, like 14-point lead in Game 2. But yeah, the Knicks, I know they got a couple of new pieces. They got Evan Fournier and Kemba Walker, but again, Kemba Walker, aside from like maybe 2 or 3 solid seasons, Kemba Walker was never all that. So I'm not too worried about him, and he's certainly regressed a lot from those like borderline all-star seasons that he had. So I'm not too worried about him. Evan Fournier is a role player, so I'm not worried about Evan Fournier either. And yeah, the Knicks, I don't think anyone's going to be sleeping on the Knicks this year. And I don't think that they're going to have a top 4 seed. Like I said, the Knicks are going to have a 500 record-ish, 7th or 8th seed at best. Simply because it's not because the Knicks suck. Now, granted, I don't think the Knicks are all that good. They should have got swept by us in the first round, and they had a couple of lucky breaks just being pretty healthy all throughout last regular season. But again, Julius Randle came out of nowhere, and like I said, they just played a lot harder than everyone else. So I don't expect the New York Knicks to do all that well. They'll be decent, 500, 7th or 8th spot. Now, moving on to tier three, these are the above average teams, teams that are going to get out the first round, second round, but I don't anticipate them making it further than the second round. I have three teams in this tier. The first one are going to be the Boston Celtics. Boston Celtics, obviously, they have two young studs in Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. Now, Jaylen Brown is a solid player. I don't think he's as good as other people might, peg him at, but, he's still a solid player. And those two players alone, with Marcus Smart and a couple of other role players, should definitely make a fairly competitive roster, right? Their front court is still a question mark, and same with their bench pieces, but they have, again, still some solid pieces off the bench like Peyton Pritchard and Aaron Nesmith, players like that. But again, I just don't think, just those two players alone with Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum are going to be enough to beat some of these other teams that I have listed above them in tiers 1 and 2. So again, the Celtics, and again, they're going through a new coaching change, and we just don't know how they're going to play out. So I think the Celtics are still better than the tier 4 teams, just given the fact that they do have Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, a couple of other solid pieces. I think they're going to be a few games over 500, but second round exits, and nothing more than that. Then I have this team was an exciting team this offseason because they acquired a couple of solid pieces, and that's going to be the Chicago Bulls. Now, on paper, they look to have a pretty solid team, right? They obviously have Zach LaVine, who is a top 5-6 shooting guard in the league. They have Lonzo Ball to pair up with him, who's a player that I actually am a big fan of. Plays great perimeter defense, is a great playmaker. Shot the three ball at a pretty great clip last season. Granted, that was his career high, but Lonzo Ball has proven to have vastly improved, and I think on a better team, in a better organization, I think he's going to thrive a lot more than he did in New Orleans. So Lonzo Ball and Zach LaVine, that's a pretty solid backcourt if you ask me. Then you have players like DeMar DeRozan on the wing, Vucevic at center, who is one of the best centers in the Eastern Conference. So the Bulls on paper, they seem to have a pretty solid squad, and again, it's all about the chemistry and how those players mesh together. But on paper, I think they have a pretty solid roster, and that's why I have them in tier 3. But again, I think they're going to be no further than the second round. Then the third and final team I have in tier 3 is going to be the Indiana Pacers. The Pacers last year were really solid, but then injuries kind of got to them, and players like Malcolm Brogdon and Miles Turner, those guys got hurt throughout the regular season, so they kind of they missed the playoffs, and they were a big disappointment to a lot of people due to those injuries. So a fully healthy Pacers team, I think, can be quite competitive. Miles Turner, Malcolm Brogdon, Sabonis, players like that. They have Rick Carlisle now as the new head coach, who's a great coach, right? He's a championship winning coach, so I expect him to turn some things around in Indiana. Now, granted, we do have one thing going for us, is that they have Lloyd Pierce as an assistant. So this isn't to throw shade at Lloyd Pierce. This is more so of a joke, but that could work in our favor and the rest of the Eastern Conference teams, the fact that Lloyd Pierce is coaching another team. But again, this is Rick Carlisle's ship, and I expect him to make the majority of the decisions, so I don't think Lloyd Pierce is going to have all that much of a negative or positive effect on the team, but who knows. But yeah, the Pacers, I think, can make some noise. I think they can make the playoffs and be a tough out for anyone that they face, but I have them as tier 3. Now, this is where things get interesting, folks. Tier 2, okay, like I mentioned at the beginning of the episode, tier 2 are very good teams, borderline elite. These guys could definitely make a finals run, maybe a dark horse finals contender, and could certainly make an Eastern Conference finals, but not quite as good as a team in the tier 1 elite bracket. So the next team I have, the first team I have in tier 2 would be the Philadelphia 76ers. Now, I know there's a lot of question marks around this team with how they're going to handle Tobias Harris and, of course, Ben Simmons. It seems like Ben Simmons isn't going to be returning to the Philadelphia 76ers this upcoming season. There were reports basically him saying that he hasn't been answering any calls or texts, and basically has cut off all communication with the Philly organization. So that doesn't seem like a good sign if you're a Phillies fan. But I think both parties are just ready to move on, right? Ben Simmons is a solid player. he in my opinion, he's like a superstar role player. I don't think he's an all-star or superstar, but he's like a turbocharged elite player. He plays great defense, can play multiple positions or defend multiple positions on defense. And he's a great playmaker, and at 6'10", being able to do the things that he does, he's a solid player. But I don't think he's going to be on the 76ers. But regardless of that, they still have Tobias Harris, and of course they have a top 3 reigning MVP candidate in Joel Embiid. So whenever you have a player like Joel Embiid on your team, that's going to make for a solid team no matter what. So Joel Embiid, in my opinion, is the best center in the NBA. As much as he cries and whines, and as much as I hated him watching him play against us in the second round, he's still a great player. So for that reason, I have the 76ers as that tier 2 team. Another team that I have in tier 2 are going to be the Miami Heat. Now, obviously, a lot of people, dubbed the Miami Heat as bubble frauds. They made that finals run and they got swept by the Milwaukee Bucks in round 1 this past season. But the Miami Heat are still solid, right? Jimmy Butler, Bam Adebayo. Now they have Kyle Lowry, who in my opinion isn't all that great, especially given his age. But Kyle Lowry still is a floor general. He can play great defense, and he knows his role. So with those 3 players alone, I think they're going to make for a pretty competitive team. And I think they're going to have a bounce back season than what they had last year. So the Heat, they're going to be a tough team. And that's why I have them in tier 2. Now, this team in particular, this team, I was going back and forth, right? Are they tier 2? Are they tier 1? I'm not quite sure. But I have for now, right, and I'm trying to be completely unbiased, I have the Atlanta Hawks as a tier 2 team right under kind of the tier 1 elite status, right? The reason for that is we need to see a little bit more, or I need to see a little bit more. Obviously, I don't think the conference finals run that we had this past season was a fluke by any means. I'm as high as anyone in the world right now on the Atlanta Hawks, but again, that was still just one season. I need to see a larger sample size. I need to see how we do and perform in the first half of the season before I really peg them in that elite category. But again, these guys, our Hawks are borderline elite. Now, the reason why I say that is because post Nate McMillan, right? I'm not talking about the pre Nate McMillan time where we had Lloyd Pierce as our head coach, where we were 14-20 at one point before we fired him, and quite frankly, all of our players, in my opinion, just didn't like the guy. There was clear, friction between the two, and I just don't think that we were performing to the best of our abilities under Lloyd Pierce. And so obviously the Hawks made the right business decision in firing him, and thank God that we did. And now post Nate McMillan, once we got Nate McMillan in the second half of the season after the All-Star break, we actually had the second highest winning percentage record in the entire NBA. So if you take that same winning percentage in the second half over the course of an entire season, which obviously we know this past season was a shortened season at 72 games, we would have been right around in that kind of low 50 win mark, right? Now, if you expand that over the course of 82 games, that's like a borderline 60-win team if you take that same winning percentage that we had with Nate McMillan and you apply that over the course of an entire season. And which, as we know, if you're a team that eclipses the 60-win mark, that's pretty damn elite, in my opinion. But yeah, obviously the team did a full 180 once we hired Nate McMillan as the interim head coach, and now that we have him, I think good things are going to happen. Obviously, we had a lot of injuries throughout the regular season. We were one of the most injured, depleted teams in the entire NBA, and had we had a full healthy roster basically the whole season, I think we definitely could have been a top 3 seed in the East this past season. Now, again, I know injuries are a part of the game, and I know we're not going to see a fully healthy team 100% healthy for the entirety of the season, even going into next season. So injuries will happen, load management will happen, but still, I think the Hawks are in really good position to be a top 3, top 4 seed in the East this coming season. And I'm just excited to see what Nate McMillan can do under his coaching, under his, direct direction and vision. We have a full off season now, a full training camp under Nate McMillan coming off that big conference finals run. So I think this team's trajectory is just this, right? We're only going to keep going up now, and the players love them. The coaches love them, and I think it's a win-win on both teams, which is why I have them as the highest of the tier 2s, borderline elite status. Now, that's not a knock on our Hawks. The two teams here in tier 1 are just better, at least for now, and that's going to be the Milwaukee Bucks coming in as the next team in Tier 1. So the Milwaukee Bucks, obviously, they just won a championship. They still have Giannis, they still have Drew Holiday, they still have Chris Middleton, and a bunch of solid role players. So for that reason, I don't think you can peg the Hawks above the Bucks. Yes, the Bucks got a little lucky with Trey being injured and DeAndre Hunter being injured, but still, you got to give credit where credit's due. The Milwaukee Bucks won a championship, and they still have Giannis and all those other players that I mentioned. So for that reason, I have them as the second team on Tier 1. And then the first team in Tier 1, the elite status, is going to be, of course, the Brooklyn Nets. The Brooklyn Nets, even when they were missing Kyrie Irving and basically a hobbled James Harden with only KD to carry that team, they still pretty much almost beat the Milwaukee Bucks. They went to 7, and they were literally a toenail length away from a KD three-pointer from knocking the Bucks out of the playoffs. So who knows what would have happened if we would have played the Nets in the conference finals. But again, KD is that good where he basically almost single-handedly beat that series against the Milwaukee Bucks. But again, going to this new season, you have a healthy James Harden, a healthy Kyrie Irving, KD, and yeah, those three players alone are basically probably the best trio in the entire NBA. So for that reason, I have them as the first team in Tier 1 category. So those are all 15 teams in the Eastern Conference, and I'm curious to hear your guys' thoughts about where you rank these other Eastern Conference teams. I did a poll, or I tweeted this, something similar like this a couple days ago. I think it was last week, on how I would rank the Eastern Conference. This is pretty much identical to what I tweeted, with the exception of a few minor tweaks that I made. But yeah, this is my list. This is my ranking from all of the Eastern Conference teams 1 through 15. Just to recap: Tier 1, the Nets and the Bucks. Tier 2, the Hawks, the Heat, and the 76ers. Tier 3 are going to be the Pacers, the Bulls, and the Celtics. Tier 4 are going to be the Knicks, Wizards, Hornets, and Raptors. And then the bottom feeders, the non-playoff teams, are going to be the Magic, Pistons, and Cavs. So if you're a Pistons, Cavs, or a Magic fan, I'm sorry. It's not a knock on you guys. The East is just that good this year, and you guys just aren't better than the other teams that I listed above you all. So that's really going to be it for today's episode. I am very eager, and I'm looking forward to hearing some of where you guys peg our Atlanta Hawks, where you peg these other different teams. But I'm really excited for this new season. I think the East is going to be extremely competitive, and you can make an argument that the East is almost as good as the West now. I don't think they're quite there just yet, but there is an argument, and I think the East is going to surprise a lot of folks this year. I mean, even just that 1 through 6 seed, 1 through 6 in the East are going to be very, very competitive. So I'm looking forward to it. This is going to be a tough road ahead for our Atlanta Hawks, but I think we have the team, the coaching, and the ownership to really lead us, and making sure and proving to the world that this conference finals run was not a fluke. I think we definitely have a really good position and opportunity to make another conference finals run. Hopefully we get healthy. And now with Trey Young, DeAndre Hunter, Cameron, Sean Collins, all those players are getting another year under their belt. That's only going to help them, and that deep playoff run that we just had is only going to help them as well. So I'm really excited about this season. I think the Hawks can be in that Tier 2, possibly borderline elite status, but I need to see a little bit more. But yeah, with that being said, I'm looking forward to the season, and please let me know your guys' thoughts, comments, questions, concerns in the comments below. Really excited to hear them. And yeah, let me know what you guys think. Let me know where you peg our Atlanta Hawks this year, and how good they are, how bad they are. You let me know in the comments below. If you like the Atlanta Hawks, if you love them, you can't get enough content, please subscribe to the channel. Hit that big red subscribe button down below. We will be making videos like this every single week, especially once the regular season comes back up again. We will be doing live streaming, things like that. So call into the show. We'll be taking live caller reactions, and a few viewers on the YouTube channel have suggested possibly making a Discord room. So if you guys are interested or want to do a Discord room, please give this video a thumbs up, leave it in the comments below. But yeah, that could certainly be on the horizon as well. So really excited for this new upcoming season. I think our Atlanta Hawks are in prime position to make a lot of noise. So yeah, with that being said, that's going to be it for today's video. Thank you guys so much for watching. Go Hawks, and I will see you guys next time.